truthfulness, integrity. And as we've been practicing and learning this year, the paramis are not entirely about meditation. They are qualities and powers. They're powers that help us to live more authentically, to live with more presence in our families and in our communities. They're powers. They can grow as we cultivate and nurture them. So truthfulness and integrity. I don't know for you, but for me, truthful behavior and acting with integrity can sometimes be a challenging way to live life. It takes courage to be honest. It takes courage to be honest. But a life lived with integrity demonstrates strength and presence. And it demonstrates a capacity for equanimity and compassion. It has been said that integrity is the heart that is undivided. Integrity is an undivided heart. And the paramis, they support us in being more aligned with the Four Noble Truths, which is what Bill was talking about last week. That one of Buddha's very first teachings was that the source of our suffering comes from our attachments, wanting something to be other than it is. And we don't learn this from readings. We learn this from the experience of living. And as we deepen our practice, we become a little more hip to what's coming through and all the little tricks and habits that our minds play or we do in order to maintain some illusion of control, right? I got this. Oh, here, I'm doing it again. Caught in reactivity of impatience or greediness or some aversion, or maybe I'm about to tell a little lie. Trying to orchestrate a conversation or maybe a feeling, some way that may be a little more comfortable or a little less uncomfortable, or maybe the trying to help the other person to be in less distress. And in that way, it's well-meaning for sure. For sure. But we grow more understanding that it's inherently limiting and limited. And we get a little more clarity about what's really driving this little white lie. What's really going on? The Dharma and meditation teacher Gil Fonsdale said this in one of his teachings. In a mindfulness practice, we investigate more deeply the nature of our experience. Truthfulness doesn't exist independent of kindness, usefulness, and timeliness. There's the wisdom of discernment. Love of truth, he writes, is more important than love of self. The self is contained within the truth. There are so many kinds of untruths. And for sure today, I'm not talking about the lies where there's physical danger or violence. I'm not talking about that today. I want to spend a little more time talking about the seemingly harmless lies. The lies that we may say to spare someone a difficult feeling, even if that someone may be ourselves. I'm really sorry. I didn't see your text, but I did. Or no, you don't look fat in that dress. You don't. You look great. And I know you know what I mean. I could probably ask you all to chat just one little one in there in the chat box, and I think it would be pretty full, right? Because we know this. Oh my. We want to get curious about the impulses that happen so quickly and habitually to smooth over any uncomfortable little truth. And we say, and even when, this is sort of what I'm thinking about here, we tell well-meaning lies to our friends or family, well-meaning. It compromises our connection to them. It keeps us separate and isolated. And their view of who we are becomes a little fuzzy. Right? It's as if we've put a veil between us. Is the temporary comfort worth the disconnection and isolation? That's the question for your investigation. Are you really present when a little lie is being told? And it is a strategy we've learned. We have learned it, but it can become habitual and so subtle. And in these moments when we deny access to the truth, just like how important it was for us to explore moments of impatience as we are cultivating, growing patience, it's the same thing here. We want to examine, it's the same examination with truthfulness and integrity. We want to begin to notice the subtle graspings and fear that can arise when we're not truthful, or what the stirrings are inside right before that choice point to tell a little white lie. What's going on? Some of you may know of a man named Sam Harris. He's a neuroscientist, a philosopher. He writes about ethics and spirituality and climate change and just about anything and everything. I don't believe he says he's a Buddhist, but he talks a lot about living a spiritual life without believing in a deity on. And he wrote this little book. It's 21 or 24 pages. It's entitled Lying. And you can get it on a PDF. I'll put it in if people are interested. And in this book, he shares, he asked people to write in a lie that was told, a well-meaning lie, but nonetheless had an impact on their lives. I'm going to share this story that a woman wrote about a lie that was well-meaning. She writes, "My mother was diagnosed with MS when she was in her late 30s. And her doctor thought it was the best to lie and tell her that she didn't have MS. He told my father the truth. My father decided to keep the truth to himself because he didn't want to upset my mother or the 3 children. Meanwhile, my mother went to the library to read up on her symptoms and diagnosed herself with MS. She decided not to tell my father or their children because she didn't want to upset anyone. And 1 year later, when she went to the doctor for her annual checkup, the doctor told her she had MS. And she confessed that she already knew she had it, but she hadn't told anyone. She hadn't told her husband. My dad confessed, or her husband confessed that he knew, but hadn't told anyone. So they spent a year with a secret and without each other's support. And she writes, my brother found out accidentally about a year later when my mother had breast cancer, and the surgeon walked into the room and said, "Oh, this is not going to affect the MS." And my brother said, "What MS?" She says, I think it was a couple of more years before anyone told me or my sister about my mom's MS. And then she says, rather than feeling grateful and protected, I felt sadness that we hadn't come together as a family. My mother never told her mother about the MS, which meant that none of us could tell friends or family for fear that our grandmother would find out. And she ends by saying, I think she deprived herself, well-meaning, but of the opportunity to have a closer relationship with her mother. Integrity requires courage and the ability to be with discomfort. Of course, this is our own pacing. Integrity offers connection and compassion and presence. And I'm looping back to Gil Fonsdale's words. Truthfulness doesn't exist independent of kindness, usefulness, timeliness. Love of truth is more important than love of self. The self is contained within the truth.